Czarinaty. It's the new podcast on your airwaves, and we are here to stay. This is the place where it's all about creating and protecting your peace while living your healed and happy life. Start your journey to peace today. Create your peace. Live it, wear it, be it. If you don't have peace, get you some. You know it's peace, it's serenity.
All this good energy, spreading positivity. You don't know what the place.
You know it's peace, it's serenity.
You can come and catch a vibe. Just listening will reach your mind. It's all a part of God's
You know
design.
it's peace, it's serenity.
All this good energy, spreading positivity. You don't know what the place.
You know it's peace, it's serenity.
You can come and catch a vibe. Just listening will reach your mind. It's all a part of God's design.
What's up, Peace Squad, and welcome to the Peace and Serenity podcast inside the Peace and Serenity Lounge on Mixed Talk Radio. I am your host and virtual peace influencer, Serena Linnell, and I am your girl who is all about peace and serenity. This is the place where it's all about finding, creating, maintaining, and protecting your peace. Here on the Peace and Serenity podcast, we will have fun, we will have conversation, and we will definitely have peace. There's 151 countries, y'all, but there's only one peace and serenity. If you don't have peace, get you some. You are tuned in to Peace and Serenity podcast, whether it's the start of your day, the middle of your day, or the end of your day. We are so glad you tuned in to recharge, refuel, and refocus while riding this peace party train. It's the hottest new show, y'all. Let's go! Our next guest was born in Germany, but grew up all over the world. He loves God and he loves people. He is a connector and a community architect. He enjoys helping others activate their purpose and passion through strategic alliances. He has 8 years of financial services in the professional sector. He deems himself as a military brat, and he is the co-founder of Two or More Men Community Network. He is a board member of the International Business Academy, Newman Smith High School, and he is none other than, y'all get ready. Get ready. He is none other than Mr. Tyrell Patterson.
Hey, wow, on the introduction. Okay. Wow. Wow.
Bring
Thank
you
you.
in, right?
Yeah, you did. I'm over here like, man, who's that?
That's you, bro. That's you.
Man, thank you. Thank you. It's glad to be
Yes.
here.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Sure.
Just a little time and share a little bit about, your story, your insight on a couple of things. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we just gonna dive right in. And so this month we are talking about men's health. We're talking about minority mental health. And the first question I have for you is, what has life been like for you being a Black man in America?
Man, that right there, that's a packed question. That is a packed question. Like I said, first of all, thank you for having me on. Absolutely. Just glad to be here. And what has it been like being a Black man in America? Uniquely, like you said in the beginning, growing up a military brat. I was born in Germany, raised in, lived in Oklahoma, Hawaii, Florida, Nebraska, and Texas now, as I'm residing here now. And so what's so interesting about those journeys is for the first 10 years of my life, I hadn't predominantly been in the mainland, as they say. When I left Hawaii at the age of 10 and moved to Miami, Florida, I had a real wake up call. I had a culture shock. I lived in Miami-Dade County. If you ever watch First 48,
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's where I learned to have tough skin and learned, all know how to function in all different types of environments. And I really realized what culturally speaking, what what blackness was. I didn't have a reference point of what it was. As far as I knew I could dance. I liked the music. Being an athlete, that was the equalizer. Being in a lot of spaces, but growing up as a kid, and when you're the only black students in your school in Hawaii and dealing with being bullied and all those other things, now I go completely to an opposite environment. Well, it's nobody but me. Yeah. Everybody left to my right is black or Latino or Hispanic or minority, if you will, and that's the norm. So I went from being the only in school to being one of so many, right? So I'm like, man, and thinking I'm going to fit, right? I'm like, everyone looks like me, right? Everyone, there's athletes, there's people who like music and dance just like me. However, I've said this in the past, I started to communicate or talk to a few people in my class, like, hey, where are you from? Because they say, hey, you talk white, is what they said. Hey, you talk white. Where are you from? And I'm like, I guess this is how I was raised, how I talk. What does this mean? And they just associate it with, proper talking or enunciation with like, hey, white people, is you talk white. And so I had to balance that dichotomy of one, I finally in a space where it's primarily black students and primarily black kids, but I still didn't have a sense of home. I still did not fit in because of the way I spoke. And again, being an athlete, it kind of was the equalizer. But growing up and into adulthood, I definitely have found a stronger sense of identity, just honestly in my relationship with God, my relationship with Christ. He kind of showed me how to be first identified as a son of him, a son of the king, and then how that applies to every aspect of my life. So that is expressed through being a black man in America. That's expressed through being a husband. That's expressed through being a community advocate and a community architect. It's expressed through all those things. And I just so happened to get the opportunity and the grand gift of expressing it through a black man's experience in America. So it comes from a very diverse background, but being a black man in America, even right now, I still get nervous when I see cops driving down the street, right? I still am mindful of my demeanor when I'm not dressed up as if I came out the office, not in my suit, not in my tie, not in my dress shirts. If I'm just in my athletic wear, I'm just subconsciously aware of the moves I make and kind of where I'm at. And then at the same time, I'm not fearful to engage other cultures and other people, because being one who speaks Spanish fluently at work, like they're like, what, where you from Dominican Republic? I'm like, no. And so I feel like I'm somewhat of an anomaly because I can connect and understand the reality of the things I face every single day. And at the same time, I don't feel limited by that imposed fear. I still have somewhat of a radical courage to still take certain things head on and not just conform to how society says you should, and kind of abide by the nonverbal rules of engagement. Those really don't exist. But yeah, so I would say that's kind of a summary of what my experience has been like. Fast forward to now.
Ooh, Jesus. And that was like a mouthful. That was like that, but it was so good because we don't hear about these kinds of experiences, right? Where you're born in another country or you grew up, outside of the States, and, you come here and you're like, okay, like, you feel comfortable. You see people that look like you.
Hey, they look just like me, right?
And then when you go to try to build relationships with them, they're looking at you like, okay, but, who are you? Where did you come from? We can't relate. And so then it's like, okay, well, I look like them, but I don't fit in. Like, how does that work? So that's great. That's very different. It's a very different story, one that I have not heard of before. So you're the first. So it's very interesting. And coming here at the age of 10, and kind of what you went through before you came to the States. And then once you were here for a while, and, you're now going from, say, middle school to high school.
Yeah.
And to your point, they were saying you talk white, and you're like, okay,
Right.
I don't even know what that means. Like, I talk how I talk, right?
Right.
And so there wasn't really this experience of, I would say, any negative or adverse experience being in your Blackness as a child. But
Right.
coming here and then being here
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit, what was that like once you say I would even say like high school years?
High school years. I mean, it's so interesting you asked that because I had moved from Miami, Florida, summer going into 8th grade to Omaha, Nebraska, Midwest America. So I went from an environment where friends were calling me Rail. Hey, what up, Rail? What up, Rail? What up, Tyrell? Being acknowledged by your, athletics and your natural, physical abilities and accolades and all that, and I moved to Nebraska. And I remember one of the first, it's so perplexing. I never forget this story. It's my second week in Nebraska, and I moved because my dad was stationed there, and then my siblings and my mother, they came over in the winter, like in January, February, but I came over in July, the summer prior, to get acclimated. I wanted a full school year there. So anyway, it's my second week there, and I ended up, I guess, connecting with someone at lunch, second week of school, and he happened to have to walk home the same way I walked home. Young Black guy. We're both in 8th grade. So anyway, we're walking down this hill, and finally we split at the top of the hill. He goes right, I keep going straight to the apartments I was walking to. All of a sudden, this car pulls up the hill and hits a U-turn and drives towards me, and then slows down and puts the windows down. And these young Hispanic guys just slowly was like, "Hey, we heard you rep Crip," and I'm like, pause. My brain, and I'm kind of goofy naturally, but anyway, in that moment, I was like, how I just moved from Miami-Dade County, which is one of the roughest counties to grow up in, to Nebraska. It's my second week here, and they asking me if I rep a gang, and I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is not real. But at the same time, I knew exactly what time it was because the guys that were sitting in the car were looking straight, and on the driver was looking at me. So I was like, all right, don't move too quick, don't do nothing crazy. And I said, I just moved here from Miami. I don't know what y'all talking about. And then they said, where'd the other guy go? I'm like, oh, so they must have been pacing like behind. They must have seen these two Black kids walking. And I guess the kid I connected with, he was gangbanging. He was actually in that life, and I had no idea. So again, I'm in a new environment, predominantly white America, right? Midwest America. We're sprinkled in there, right? We were sprinkled in there. And so I connected with him coming from an environment where it was predominantly Black students, right? I connected with him in an environment where I thought I became the minority. So I connected with him because of, again, skin color. We're both Black, boom, whatever. And he was in a life contrary to what I was used to or normalized. And I almost was potentially killed by association. Why? Because I looked like him. And what's interesting is like when I when I got engaged and on my bachelor weekend, me and my boys, we went to Kansas City and stayed with my uncle, and we all were around the table and asking ourselves a question. We asked everyone a question, and we answered this one question: when did you find out you were Black? Like as young men, when did you find out you were Black? And we all were like, Someone says when his mom came to pick him up in elementary school, and the teacher called him something that the mom didn't name, and he said his mama had to have a conversation with the teacher because the teacher called him a name and abbreviated it, but like, that's not my son's name. And she corrected him to say, hey, go ahead and call my son what I named him. She kind of abbreviated to make it more common, easier to, whatever. And that's what he's like, okay, something was different there. Another friend said, hey, I went to a predominantly affluent school, predominantly white school. And I thought they just knew me very well because they really liked me, but I didn't know that I was really to be kept aware of, to be known where I was at all times, I was a young Black man that became intimidating to some others. I was larger in stature. And so I thought teachers just kind of knew my name and they kind of know, but I was really more so, there was a hyper awareness for his presence in school. And his parents broke down to him one time where he thought he was really going back and forth with the teacher. And he didn't realize that that's really what it was when it came down to it. And for me, I was in elementary school in Hawaii. I'm in the line, in the water fountain line, and a little girl turns around and calls me a black crayon. I bust out laughing. I'm in kindergarten. How do I know to laugh, right? So she called me, you little black crayon. And I was laughing. But when I went home and told my parents, they didn't think it was so funny. Then I realized, okay, something here is like, she meant that malice, maliciously. She meant that
in a negative.
So and as a kid, I'm like, black crayon. I'm like, what? I'm laughing. And so we asked ourselves that question, hey, when you realized you were black? And so we kind of able to locate and pinpoint times where we realized, hey, there was something different about us, but we would begin the journey to have to navigate being black in America as young men and growing into our adulthood. And so it's like, through the years, I've realized through even like a stressful situation of being pulled over, or a stressful situation of having to really, my heart hurt for others, like seeing George Floyd killed, laying on the ground there, right? Calling out for his mother, right? Knowing that that could literally be me. That could literally be my pops. That could literally be my cousin, my friends. And the tension of having genuine friendships, right, with people that truly don't fully understand, but they have an eagerness to learn at the same time. You don't have the bandwidth to really express the energy to explain and help them learn. Like, there's a lot of layers to that experience. So again, being a little bit of an anomaly that I am, I was on a podcast one time with my good bro, Brandon, and we were talking about the complexities of how how racism plays out in everyday culture. And the only way I could really explain it was, I said, you and I were born into environments where there were thoughts and there were mindsets that existed long before you and I got here.
Yes.
So when we're born innately as children, as developing people, you only have two options usually when you're interacting in environments. You can either adapt to something or you can adopt it. If you adapt to it, it means that maybe internally, privately, you still kind of maneuver and think the way you do think. And in public, you know how to adjust that to make sure you comply, or make sure you can conform or don't have anything kind of friction, tension there. Or you can adopt it, whether consciously or unconsciously, to where you start to exemplify those very behaviors and mindsets in order to not lose, whether it's social gain, monetary gain, whatever that gain is. There's a benefit you receive from it. So you start to know how to do that very early at a very young age. And I said, unfortunately, I learned that when I first met my great grandmother, she had glasses, and I said, Dad, is this where it started? He's like, yeah, 3 generations ago, great grandma Donna Jean, she's the reason why you got to wear glasses today. I was like, dang. And then it dawned on me that generationally, there were thoughts and mindsets that existed long before we got here. And growing up in those environments, you only had a choice to adapt or adopt or absorb what was around you. So your environment and your exposure to things kind of preset and programmed your options, even though there were other options elsewhere.
Basically.
So you have a bunch of people walking around extremely dysfunctional, and in their mind, it's normal. But what I said was, it's like when you finally wake up, it's like not realizing that you took in something and you become intoxicated. So if you have 3 people over here and none of them have drank, and the one person on the left, they're stumbling, they're falling, your eyesight is blurry.
And have not,
it takes someone that's not living under the influence of those mindsets, not living under the influence of those environments anymore, to finally say, okay, I'm no longer going to allow those things to impose itself on me, but I will now take what I've learned through my exposure, through my experiences, through the truth, learning truth, which is objective outside of myself. And I will take those things and I will impose on the environment what I've learned. I will now impose, and now I will become an influence, which is the third thing. You either can adopt something, you can adapt to it, or you learn how to impact and influence a thing, which we don't get taught the third as a child. When children truly have influence, it's usually untamed and unwielded. So it gets looked at as acting out, and it gets looked at as being excited, and they have ADD. Really, they're probably a natural born influencer, truly impacting a world changer that needs to be molded. So that's what I told him. I'm like, man, you have a lot of people living under the influence of racism, living under the influence of bias, classism, prejudice, all that. And they have not been able to come to a place to where they've sobered up, whatever it's a realization from self or a realization of finally that day when George Floyd is laying there and Officer Chauvin's knee is on his neck. There was a lot of people that were able to locate themselves and say, wait a minute, it was their sobering moment, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us grew up and we had sobering moments. We knew these things were going on, but it's almost like the curtain was unveiled and a lot of people became aware and were now sober, and they had to make a decision. They're like, wait a minute.
Because it was in their face. You
Right.
have to make a decision now. There's nothing else going on. How about God stop the world? So now there's nothing else going on but this. So you have to pay attention to this. And now you have to make a decision about what's been going on, what's going on, what has continued to go on for years.
Correct.
And so, yeah.
So either they had a choice. Did you want to continue to take in those mindsets and continue to be intoxicated and living under the influence of that dysfunction of those mindsets? Or did you want to say, finally, like, you know what? How about I pause real quick on taking in those same like thoughts? How about I not reinforce my own biases? Let me put myself in a new space. Let me learn a little bit. Let me educate myself. And it's those people who no longer have to live under the influence of what's been imposed on them from birth. We're talking generations, right? We're talking slavery, pre-slavery.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of learning people experienced, but I think a lot of people are still waking up. A lot of us are still realizing. And last comment I'll make regarding that, growing up as a young Black man around people that looked like me, I was gifted the opportunity to realize that all Black people are not monolithic and we're not all the same. And so just because I look just like you and you look just like me does not mean we have the same reference point, the same understandings, the same beliefs, the same context, the same interests, the same knowledge. We don't. We're all super unique people.
Yep.
And we do a disservice to one another and don't give room to learn about one another if we automatically assume and assimilate to each other based off of how we look. And if we stop there, then we truly don't. We do our communities a disservice, and we keep ourselves in the cycle of not expecting more from one another, publicly being like, y'all did y'all cousin wrong, but at the same time, you will not get in that community and serve that community and go give these kids water and go help these kids learn math and STEM. So it's just a cycle that needs to be avoided, and we all got to wake up. But I think it's not just one-sided. I think it's all.
I mean, and to add to that, we not expecting more from others, but then we end up not expecting more of ourselves. Which is even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so our time is running out, but really quickly, I mean, I'm telling you, you are a different kind of being. I love it. I love it, y'all. I'm in all the gems that Mr. Tyrell is dropping. I want you to tell us about two or more, because I believe that all this goodness that you're sharing with us today is also being shared in that space. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, man, long story short, Two or More was a community and a space created by two guys, my good friend Jeremiah and myself, who connected about 5.5 years ago in the young adult scene. And we realized that Dallas was void of a space where men could connect and just grow. Whether you were a father, a CEO, educator, a doctor, a brother, stay-at-home father, whatever it may be, men needed a space where we can drop our titles, connect and have a safe space. And we call it the locker room and the boardroom. And really, a space where whether it's exercising and working out together, where it's discussions, where we're getting vulnerable, we're talking about equipping one another. We're talking about holding each other accountable. We're talking about community service, serving the city. And it's not limited to one idea, but it is founded in, it's called Two or More because it's founded in Matthew 18:20. And it states, where two or three are gathered in my name, you are there. So it's founded on, we call it Two or More Christ community culture. We exist to grow men in their identity with Christ, connect them in a thriving community in order to impact and change the culture with kingdom culture. So it's to restore effective leadership locally and nationally. And by any means, whether it's connecting, creating spaces where, again, guys can take off their title and really dive into some things, whether it's generational things. We collaborate across industries as well. Over 176 members across 3 countries now. And we went online during the pandemic, and that's what really expanded a lot of things where people were connected, whether via social media. And we just knew there was a void. A lot of women have spaces they can connect, and we felt men needed one too. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, just that space where they can, like you said, they can let their titles go, let their guards down in a safe space, and have an opportunity to just talk, really,
yeah, and shameless plug, we actually have, so on our YouTube channel, we created a lot of content and a lot of things men can journey through. We have one of my favorite, we called it, it was Industry Talks, and we got with our good friend, Dr. Melvin McDowell, has 2 mental health practices out of Detroit, out of Saginaw, Michigan. And we talked about debunking therapy. Why should men consider therapy? Why should men have the dichotomy of, if I have therapy, does that mean I don't have faith? So it's a great tool, resource to kind of dive through and to kind of confirm. It's like, hey, I've been thinking about having a therapist. I don't know where to start. Where should I start? How do you even fund that type of service? So it's called Debunking Therapy, and that's on YouTube. So I think that's a great resource for guys to go listen to.
Absolutely. Man, I hope you are listening. This month is all about y'all. So I hope you are listening. Do you have any last words? Like, is there anything else you want the listeners to know? How can the listeners of the Peace and Serenity Radio podcast support you? Where can we find you? You have anything coming up? Any events that you want us to support? Let us know. It's your time to speak your piece.
Man, I would just say, again, thank you again for having me on. I would say you can stay connected with me through, of course, Instagram. That's going to be at Tyrell D. Patterson. It's going to be Instagram. And then also on YouTube, I also have a YouTube channel and a web series out called Perspective. Started it last summer. And the whole purpose of Perspective is to learn life-changing principles to apply to your daily life to transform the world around you. It's simply that. We have guests here and there. We dive through different topics, different focuses. It's a real different lens. And then also 2 or more, if you want to follow our men's community network on Instagram, it's all one word at 2 or more. And so I think the last thing I would say to everyone listening is that don't discount the part you play, and also be okay with the part you play, because we all are running a leg of a race. It's generational. It didn't start with us, and it's not going to end with us. So I think the best thing you can do for the people around you and for those who you're trying to impact is to be okay with the part you play. Start where you stand. Okay. And also know that you're not all doing it alone. You're not the only one in this fight. You're not the only one trying to make change. There's a lot of people out there doing it, but you can get burnt out real quick if you're not okay with the part you play.
Absolutely.
So just impact anyone that you can come in contact, impact where you're at, even if that's just your household, even if that's just your community. It may not be an influencer with 1 million followers, but I think we should all be okay with the part we play and start somewhere. Start where you stand. So
yes, start where you can. Be okay with where you are. I love that. And oh my gosh, this has just been like a joy. This is the first, but hopefully it won't be the last, because we're going to have to do this.
Not. Yeah, we have to do this again. Absolutely.
We're going to have to do this again. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
I wish you nothing but peace and serenity in all of your future endeavors. And
Thank
yes. We're going to do this here again. Hey, Peace Squad. You are tuned in to the Peace and Serenity Radio podcast right here inside the Peace Lounge on Mixed Talk Radio. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
I am your host, Serena Linnell, and I want to thank you, the Peace Squad, for tuning in and rocking with your girl. If you would like to be a guest on the show, market your business or event, or would like to sponsor a show or show segment, please send an email to peaceandserenity@gmail.com. Please like this podcast, favorite this podcast, and be sure to turn on post notifications. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit peaceandserenity.com for your peaceful resources and your peace gear. If you are in search of peace, if you want peace in your life, I encourage you to start your peace today. That's all I want for y'all. I just want you to have a little peace. If you don't have peace, get you some. I'm out. Peace.